But UFC 256 was shaping up pretty well. Look, Usman-Burns is not going to have the sex factor, of a Colby on one side of it, or a Conor or whatever. But that's one of the best fights you can make in this sport right now. And the co-header for that one is looking like it would be Amanda Nunes defending her 145 belt against Megan Anderson. So while it's certainly not great news that this falls apart, Luke, I think it does give UFC an opportunity to build up that pay-per-view even larger and add some more commercial crossover sort of name value to it, while still getting a very good fight to replace Burns Usman. And you mentioned there was no shortage of people coming out and throwing their name into the mix. We can go up and down it, but I'm interested in saying, if you are Dana White, Mick Maynard, the other guy, Sean Shelby, you call up your Endeavor friends, right? You're probably having an eyes wide shut party, no pants, covered eyes, you know what I'm saying? Maybe the Illuminati's involved, and you're like, what are we going to do for 256? Let's bring in Luke Thomas to help us book the territory. What's the best fix here?
Well, so some of the reporting that has come out to me that I've seen is that they have a few options. You already mentioned they've got Nunes and Anderson sort of tentatively targeted for this card. So that's an interesting one, but that's more like a fun addition. As good as Amanda Nunes is, it's just not on paper the most competitive fight. I think a lot of folks look at that as sort of a lion being fed a gazelle. We'll see if that ends up being true in the end. They're still waiting to hear about what's going to happen between Peter Yan, your UFC bantamweight champion, and Aljamain Sterling. But the one that caught my attention that I thought was the most interesting, and I don't know if it's doable, but I like the idea. Francis Ngannou wants his title shot, and he wants it against Stipe Miocic. That was also reported that the UFC has reached out to both sides to see if that's something they can get going. Now, obviously, we have Francis Ngannou beating Jairzinho Rozenstruik, back in May, and doing it with absolute ease. I mean, did the fight even last 30 seconds? I don't think that it did. And then you have another 5-round fight just this past August for Stipe Miocic. So they are in different positions. One, Francis has been waiting a lot longer. And two, that was a much tougher fight than what Francis had to go through versus what Stipe had to go through for DC the second time. Nevertheless, if it's your last pay-per-view of the year, while I like the Nunes and Anderson fight, and while I absolutely love the Yan and Sterling fight, neither of those are your get over the hump from a pay-per-view standpoint kind of major attraction. Both of those are great B, and in the case I think of Nunes and C, sort of if you want to have 3 title fights on the card, that would be your C, and if there was an A, B, and C, or a 3, if there was a 1, 2, and a 3 in your power rankings. They still need that 1. They still need that A in the title picture power rankings. For me, if they can find a way to do it, and I might understand Miocic's reticence here, BC, because not only did he have a tough fight, he already beat Francis. He's looking for something different. John Jones is out there. Maybe you go that direction, but they apparently have promised Francis a title fight. Francis's people have told me that they've promised him a title fight next. I think if you can find a way to get it done, that's got to be your clubhouse leader, right?
It should be. That would be the I think the middle ground answer, where it's safe enough. Look, you're not, even with Stipe and Francis in there with Amanda in the supporting act, you're not going to sell massive buys, but that's a sexy bout. The Ngannou-Stipe rematch, there's a lot you can do with that. I think that's the safe middle ground answer right here. And how do you get Stipe back in? Probably just pay him, right? Just pay him a little bit more. Pay him what he probably deserves at this point as a guy who regained his title and has been there for you at each step of the way. Jones would be nice to crash this party, but we're already talking about the potential of Jones Adesanya. Plus, Ngannou is more deserving. I think you can also get a pay-per-view main event out of John debuting at heavyweight without a title in some form. So this would be probably, meaning Stipe, Francis 2, safest, strongest, best move to do. You probably wouldn't have to break the bank while still giving Stipe enough to make him want to do this right now. But what about those rumors that Dana was throwing out, that he did put an offer out there for Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor? That could certainly swoop in and save the day without question, Luke. I wouldn't want or need an interim title there, but do you think UFC would be willing, if they went that direction, to put Conor in a non-title main event in a non-sort of one-off super fight situation? Like, this is a fight that is within the title picture at 155, and put Amanda in a title bout co-main event. Would that be okay?
This is the weird one for me. It's like, if they don't put Conor in there, You mean to tell me we're going to end the year without a Conor McGregor fight, except for the one in January against Cowboy that lasted, what, a minute? I mean, I forget even how long it was.
42 seconds, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was nothing. It was like cotton candy. It was there, and then it wasn't. That seems to me like almost impossible to believe, and yet it feels like that's the path that we're headed on, because my guess is Dana White put out this ultimatum, which, by the way, he leaked stuff to the press to make the fighters look a certain way. Oh, we're going to offer the fight, and we did offer the fight to Conor and to Dustin, and Dustin was like, I accept immediately. You didn't hear anything from Conor, and Dana was like, we're supposed to hear by a certain time this day. That deadline passed, and we didn't hear anything, which leads me to believe he doesn't really find that bout all that interesting. BC, I'm trying to think about this. If you're trying to get Conor McGregor to fight Dustin Poirier, how do you sell it to him? How do you sell it to him other than saying, hey, if you don't take this, you're going to be inactive even longer, right? Other than just getting out there again, what is the rationale? Because one, you have to cut to 155, which he'll do, but I think he prefers if he doesn't have to. Two, it's a non-title fight. Number three, it'd probably be a main event, which means it would be 5 rounds, which is a much more difficult thing. It probably blows up any attempts to make the Pacquiao fight, if that's even real or headed in any kind of meaningful direction. And he already beat the guy. Now, I understand the differences, as do you. This is not the Dustin Poirier he beat back then, which isn't to say that Conor can't beat him or wouldn't beat him, but it's a much more difficult task and ask this time around. Plus, Conor was on a red-hot streak, and now he's very, what do you want to say, all over the place at this point in terms of whether he's training and whether he's not. So I like that fight. I think you could go that direction. But Stipe has an obligation to defend the title. That's a little bit different, and they can do something with that. They can make another interim title with John versus whoever, as you indicated. People would, riot, but you could do it. You can't make another interim belt. Gaethje already has it.
Well, let me answer your question. You threw out a rhetorical in there, Luke. You said, what would they do to get Conor to do it? You'd have to guarantee that he gets Khabib if he wins. I mean, straight up. Khabib could say every day of the week, I want to go out and fight GSP and be done, and I don't want to be, in the same puddle with this piece of shit. Your boy, I will smash him. You'd have to sit down and be Dana and not send it via DM and maybe do a blood oath and shake hands and say, look, Conor, you come back and you fight Poirier in this pay-per-view main event. We're not going to, we're going to give you Conor money. We're not going to give you Floyd money, but you come do this for us. You're getting the Khabib rematch because it makes sense for all of us. That would have to be a conversation Dana would have to have with Khabib to make that work, certainly. Do you think Tony Ferguson fits into this scenario at all, considering he was just did an interview with Ariel in the past 24 hours, and I was able to skim it, and Tony's pretty upset with the way UFC handled the whole thing with the Poirier fight coming to him last minute, assuming he would take things. He did call out Dana, said, look, we're not boys, we're not friends, right? This is business, and basically put out there, I have been a company man for them. I stood up for them during the quarantine, fought Gaethje last minute, and now they're not necessarily respecting me. I need another fight in 2020. I'll main event either the November or December cards. Give me Poirier, give me McNuggets, give me Chandler, but pay me for it. Is there any scenario, do you think, where Tony can crash this party?
As a headliner, I mean, you can make the Poirier and Ferguson fight, and you and me would love it till our dying day, but I don't know that that's a fight you could put in there. I mean, imagine if what you had was you couldn't convince Stipe to do it for whatever reason. Conor is just not going to play ball for whatever reason. He's not going to. And these are very plausible scenarios, by the way. It leaves you with Nunes and Anderson, Jan and Sterling, which are, at least in the latter of those two, a totally competitive fight. Fine title fights, I suppose, all things considered. And then you have Poirier versus Ferguson. Now, don't get me wrong, that is a killer card for hardcores, and maybe they end up going that direction. I mean, part of this whole year has been, if we can meet our volume quota with these contractual revenue deals that we have, that being the UFC, they don't have to bend to the stars in the ways that they might have had to 4 or 5 years ago. The game has certainly changed in that way. So maybe they just end up going that way. But as a headlining fight, no, I don't think you can do that. I think it's just another fun fight. Plus, if you end up doing it that way, where you put it on the pay-per-view and you've got 2 title fights above it, it can't headline, which means it's going to be 3 rounds. Maybe you do want Poirier versus Ferguson for 3 rounds, given all the battles they've been in, but you have to be okay with that ahead of time and say, there's a reason why we don't want that to be 5, right?
Right, but Conor's going to be nobody's co-main event. He's going to headline if he fights, and he should. And you should put the title fights as the co-main event if they're not bigger than a Conor fight. And what title fights are bigger than any Conor fight? So I'm of the belief, and we've seen it before, right? You know, Diaz, Conor 1 was the main event to Holly Tate for the title. I know that was a last-minute scenario. It was supposed to be RDA. But if it's Conor, it should main event. If it's not, you know, if you can get Ferguson Poirier, but I don't think you can. I mean, I don't think you can put out the money unless you're paying them. I mean, one thing Ferguson said in that interview was, I bring pay-per-view buys. So no, I think at this point, Luke, no one's willing to take a discount and fit in as your second or third fight and do it for 3 rounds. They want a headline. UFC has to step up and just basically say, look, lightweight division is our sex division. Everyone in there is a star. Let's get the 2 guys that fit the price for us. But let's put it as the main event. I'm all for that. I wanted to ask you one thing, though, about Tony Ferguson before we close. Okay. He talked about that he wants us to be so busy, UFC won't let him, that he thinks he can go as high as 205, Luke. Light heavyweight. He thinks his frame could support light heavyweight, and he's willing to fight in any weight class above lightweight just to stay busy. Is this just El Kukui talk? Because I know you and him have that weird relationship. Do you remember that open workout when he was playing with those crystal balls and then he came over and gave you that gift? What the hell was that about, Luke?
It was a grip trainer. He gave me a grip trainer. Yeah. No, I mean, you couldn't do that all the way back when MMA was much less fully fleshed out and formed, meaning there weren't as many divisions and they weren't as well staffed. Like BJ Penn trying to go up and fight Lyoto Machida and just getting absolutely worked over. You can't do that anymore. And I certainly understand he's got big power at 155, and I think some of that will probably carry up to 170 pounds. So it's not like he can't play with some of his options in the way that a lot of other lightweights have done, like Conor, like Cerrone. He can do that, I think, or even Masvidal to a degree. But 185. I mean, Luke Rockhold is a different species in terms of size than Tony Ferguson. It's simply not true. Last thing on this, and then we'll move along, BC. Speaking of Jorge Masvidal, what about as a dark horse candidate, the Colby and Jorge fight that they've been talking about? Could you do that?
Yeah, you could. And you also could, by the way, do the same with the Masvidal-Nate Diaz rematch if you wanted to bring back the BMF and make that a pay-per-view main event. You could go either of those ways to fill it. I just think that UFC, when they look at all the options on the table, Luke, it's going to be important what they do specifically with the lightweight division because they could move the story further right now. What I mean by that is we've seen Khabib and Tony fall apart 5 times, right? We've seen Conor sit out for 2 years. We've seen a lot of holes in telling the full story of us finding out who's the best lightweight, all that, everybody face each other. We already know Khabib's going to fight Gaethje. I'd like to see them get Tony, Chandler, Poirier, and Conor all 4 back in some form to close this year to further that story. So when Khabib is looking for a potential go-away retirement fight, we know out of those remaining 4 who's the hottest at the moment, who is most deserving. You can also, though, argue, Luke, that there's as much reason not to further that discussion if the hope is Conor Khabib too. And that's the ultimate lottery ticket. That's the ultimate cash-in. You may want to just play it safe and not ruin that. So that's why they get paid the big bucks, Luke. That's why they sit in the war room. That's why Dana has that large machine gun with all the drugs in it, that piece of art. I don't understand it. But, I don't make that kind of money.
Are you in?
This is our time. The world's changed, and you are right in the center of it.
I don't know what's ahead, but all bets are off.